Greetings, English 102 students. It's week 4, and hopefully you've made it through writing your fiction essay and taking test 1. But more than just making it through, I hope you've learned a lot about literary analysis and things that may also be applied to your reading and understanding of Scripture in a discerning way so that you might rightly divide and handle the word of truth as Scripture tells us. I do look forward to reading your insights about these 2 stories that you've chosen. I will try to make sure that I have all of your papers graded and back by next Monday, or this coming Monday, a week from today, by midnight Eastern time, if not before. So I really look forward to reading what you've had to say. This week's video, I want to just say a word of encouragement and maybe give you some planning ideas as you start this next unit, which is the poetry unit. And oh gosh, I love poetry, literary poetry in particular, so much. And my prayer for you is that you will develop the same enjoyment and the same sort of soul-soothing response that I have to it, or if not, that you would come to at least appreciate literary poetry a little bit more and all that goes into it. So the purpose for you for this particular unit is to learn about the poetic devices and techniques that poets use to communicate meaning in the poem. So I'm sure you've heard the old joke, well, how can this be poetry if it doesn't even rhyme? And of course, hopefully the goal is for this unit to equip you with learning about the different techniques and devices so that that kind of question will not ever come into your mind again, so that you'll learn about all of the things that distinguish sort of greeting card poetry, or what we might call commercial or didactic poetry, which is the kind of poems, little poems that you may find in your devotionals or on greeting cards, that kind of poetry, and you'll learn the techniques that distinguish literary poetry from that kind of poetry. So you'll learn about meter and rhythm and consonants and alliteration, symbolism and metaphor and paradox and all kinds of techniques that literary poets use that sort of elevates the level of creativity and the status of a poem up to literary poetry, and distinguishes it from that kind of commercial or devotional didactic poetry. And both are good, and God can use both of them to teach us, but literary poetry involves a whole lot more as far as kind of a step up, almost like looking at illustrations on a greeting card versus looking at a work of art in a museum. So kind of, hopefully you'll think of literary poetry as that kind of elevated level of art, so to speak, that literary poets have learned to write, in the way that God has gifted them tremendously to write such kind of poetry. So that's the overview of the unit and the purpose behind the unit, so I hope that that's what you'll glean from it, and you really enjoy studying these techniques and not look at it as a way to sort of deconstruct and rip a poem apart and take away your enjoyment, but more as a way to appreciate everything that went into it, and you know, sort of come to appreciate that on what you're reading on a new level. So even as it reaches in and hopefully grabs your soul in some sort of way and shows you some sort of new level of beauty, you'll hopefully appreciate that more, knowing what all went into it. So with all of that in mind, your poetry essay should then be a literary analysis of the devices and the techniques that the author uses to convey the meaning in the poem you have selected from the poetry essay instructions document. So make sure the first thing you do before you even start this unit is pull up the poetry essay assignment instructions document, again posted under course content, under syllabus and assignment instructions, and then the assignment instructions link under that. And pull up those poetry essay instructions and look at the list of poems that have been approved for you to write your paper on. And these poems have specifically been selected because they have a lot of those techniques in them that you'll be learning about. So don't just choose any random poem from the list of assigned readings, or even, from your textbook or whatever. Make sure that you choose one off the list, because if you don't, and I open up your paper and see that it's not in a poem that's even been approved, then that completely negates your whole paper. And that's actually happened to students before, so make sure that you choose one off the list. But this paper will be a chance for you to demonstrate what you have learned about the techniques, and that you can find them in a poem, and that you can apply them to interpretation and analysis, and show how they are used in a particular poem to convey meaning. So make sure that you choose your poem early on. That's my recommendation. Before you even start the unit and start doing all the reading, choose one that grabs you, or that really speaks to you personally, whether it's on a level of creating more joy, or at a level that you identify with the sorrow expressed in the poem, or that you just really appreciate the beauty of the language. Whatever it is that grabs you, pick one of those poems, and then as you begin your unit and you begin to learn about all these different techniques, you can look at the poem you've chosen and ask yourself, okay, is this technique that I'm learning about used in this particular poem? And if so, how is it used to convey meaning? And you can start taking those notes with each technique that you can learn. You can say, yes, that's in this poem that I've chosen to write about, or no, that's not in this poem. And as you learn, you can apply, and that's a perfect way to learn and go through this unit. And it's also the perfect way to prepare for your essay in advance, so that you've already got the material for your outline even before you get to the thesis outline assignment. So consider doing that. Consider going through your reading with your poem already in mind, and making notes about your poem and the things that you learn as you go. And then that'll bring you to the thesis and outline that is required for you to submit a week from today, if you're listening to this on Monday. So this coming Monday night, by midnight Eastern time, you will need to submit your thesis and outline page for the poetry essay. And the thesis for this poetry essay will basically be you stating the title of the poem, the author of the poem, and then the fact that the poem or the author uses this technique, and this technique to convey meaning X. Okay, so whatever you come up with, you're focusing on the literary techniques that you have noticed in the poem, and what kind of meaning, a specific meaning that they help convey, and that makes up your thesis statement. So I've basically sort of given you this little formula, and you can plug in the parts of the thesis statement, and have a thesis statement that flows, that makes a significant point, so that you're not just saying, oh, these literary techniques are used in this poem. No, the point you're making is how these literary techniques are used to then convey the overall meaning of the poem. Okay, so make sure that that's in your thesis statement. And then make sure that your outline is the literary techniques. That's a perfect way to do it. The literary techniques that you have listed in your thesis statement each become a point on your outline. So for example, if you choose John Donne's Batter My Heart, which I completely love that poem, if you choose that, your thesis statement might be John Donne's poem Batter My Heart uses paradox, imagery, and metaphor to convey the author's desperate need for God to intervene in his life. Okay, so if that's your thesis statement, then your outline, your points on your outline would be paradox, imagery, and metaphor. And underneath that, you would support it with quotes from the poem that actually demonstrate the use of paradox, imagery, metaphor in the poem. And in each of those paragraphs, you would show how those literary devices were then used to convey Donne's desperate need for God to intervene in his life, which is the other part of your thesis. So all through your paper, you would keep referring to, okay, this particular use of imagery shows that Donne, really needs God to intervene in his life in a violent way and get a hold of his life and turn him back to God, or free him from whatever he's struggling with. Okay, so those would be the points on your outline. So make sure that your poem is not just an interpretation or a summary of meaning, but that it does actually that you do actually analyze literary devices and techniques used in the poem, and that you show how those then convey the meaning of the poem. So I hope that makes sense to you. And feel free to, as always, to email me if you have questions regarding your poetry thesis and outline. One other reminder, consider Pretest 2, and remember that you are going to need to complete that by the end of this week also, by this coming Monday, midnight Eastern Time. And keep in mind, again, with all the pretests, you can take them over and over again until you get the full 20 points, and I highly recommend that you do. Keep in mind also that Pretest 2 covers both week 4 this week and week 5. So either you might want to read ahead or just take it multiple times until you get the right answers to help you prepare for the larger test 2 that will be coming next week. So I do hope as you read these poems that you will find that beauty and that joy, that soul-soothing feeling that I've experienced, and that hopefully expression of your own soul that you can relate to in the midst of your busyness. I hope that these poems sort of bring that to your spirit as they do mine. That's my prayer for you as you continue on throughout the course. I will be praying for you as you go through all of your responsibilities this week, in addition to class. I know that you have very busy lives, so again, I'll be praying for you as you try to work in time to do all this. And again, please email me if you have any questions. I hope you guys are enjoying the class. I sure am enjoying each of you. So we'll see you again here next week. God bless.